Hello and welcome to Todd Rolls Dice, where we're going to take a look at the two articles we currently have for the Leagues of Votann, with their codex going up for pre-order and a whole host of new models. There's quite a lot to talk about with these two articles. First one we're going to do is looking at the new army rule, then the second one is looking at the reinforcements and what these new models are going to bring, hopefully filling in some of the gaps that Votann have, because they're quite a limited model range. Even with this new wave of 5, maybe 6 new units, they're still quite limited compared to a lot of others. So we'll run through these, I'll timestamp them so you can jump to whichever article that you want. Hopefully there's some cool stuff in here. I quite like the Votann aesthetic. It's that clean sci-fi that I really like. I like the design of the weapons, I like the design of most of the vehicles, but I understand that there's a lot of people who were very disappointed that this wasn't the squats of old. But let's run through these two articles. If there's any more this week, we will obviously cover them, and they are linked in the description below so you can check them out for yourselves. But let's just jump in. Maximize your yields with the new Leagues of Votann army rule. The Leagues of Votann are pragmatic folk, and they always weigh the cost of lives against the value of a claim. Whether it's a silent and lonely asteroid, or in the middle of a raging battlefield, they know when to unleash their fury and when to remain steadfast in the face of enemy fire. And this prioritized efficiency is at the heart of their new army ability in the upcoming Codex Leagues of Votann. Previously, the kin were a little more obsessed with settling grudges against enemy units, and while that's very like them, they've now cooled off a touch and refocused their attention to taking and holding valuable resources. Remember, luck has, need keeps, toil earns. I'm not sure why they're changing the army rule. I don't think where it was in the last 6 months or so it has been overly oppressive. At the I say start of 9th. When they released in 9th, it was ridiculous. I think it got somewhere competitive, but not overly competitive in 10th. But we've seen a lot of factions get army rules changed and things, so who knows where this is going to lead them, but it gives you a newer way to play going into the last year of this edition. The new army rule carefully measures your army's progress by accumulating yield points, or YP, switching from the aggressive attack focus bonuses of hostile acquisition to the defensive buffs of fortified takeover once you hit the threshold of 7 YP. So army rules prioritized efficiency. If your army faction is Leagues of Votann units from your army have one of two abilities, hostile acquisition or fortified takeover, which we'll cover in a second. During the battle, which ability those Leagues of Votann units have will change depending on how many yield points you currently have. At the start of the battle, your units have hostile acquisition until the start of your next command phase. At the end of your command phase, if you have fewer than 7 YP, your units have hostile acquisition until the start of your next command phase. And then at the end of your command phase, if you have 7 YP or more, your units have fortified takeover until the start of your next command phase. So your base army rule is hostile acquisition, and then once you have 7 YP, it will automatically switch over to fortified takeover, and then as you spend that YP, it can switch between the two, I take it. It takes away, I suppose it all depends on how you earn YP, but it does take away player choice from what this sounds like if you're forced into switching your army rule. But then it depends what they do. How about we take a look? Army rules hostile acquisition. So this is the basic starting one, and the one that you'll have for probably the first couple of turns of the game. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack that targets an enemy unit within range of 1 or more objective markers, add 1 to the hit roll. +1 when an enemy is within range of objective markers is okay. You can reroll advance and charge rolls made for this unit. So rerolling advance and charge rolls is quite nice. This is obviously pushing you up the board and taking objectives. And then once you have the YP needed, fortified takeover comes into play. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack that targets an enemy unit, if this unit is within range of 1 or more objective markers you control, add 1 to the hit roll. And each time an attack targets this unit, if the strength characteristic of that attack is greater than this unit's toughness characteristic, and this unit is not a vehicle, subtract 1 from the wound roll. Okay. I quite like the additionals. So hostile takeover, reroll advanced charge is very nice, and then fortified takeover. They're doing a lot with this rule. This rule feels like it's doing a lot of heavy lifting within 40k 10th at the moment. is everything seems to be getting it, but -1 to wound roll if your toughness is less than the strength of the weapon hitting you, if your unit isn't a vehicle. But that's quite a nice rule, I think. Fortify takeover, it means at whatever point of the game you flipped to holding objectives instead of being aggressive and taking them. Add 1 to hit rolls while you're on objectives just means you're going to be camping those heavier, more armoured and shooty units around your objectives as you push probably flanking and chaff units up the board to try and distract your enemy. Generally, add 1 to hit rolls is quite nice. Obviously, the balance here is you get it if you're shooting at an enemy with objective markers on one rule, or you get it if you're within an objective marker on the other rule. I'm not entirely sure how useful that is. I don't know what their judgment rule was for 10th, so I don't know how big of a change this is. I probably could have looked it up, but I haven't really been looking at Votann until the new stuff, I'll be honest. But it's definitely tweaking how you're going to be playing them, and they're definitely becoming more objective focused. Until you've built up enough YP to activate Fortify Takeover, your troops get a powerful bonus to their hit roll when targeting enemies sitting on objectives, as well as the ability to reroll advances and charges. That's the bit I like. This incentivizes quick and decisive action in the early game, before castling up and defending those all-important objectives at all costs. It's... Having an army rule, this is one of the reasons I didn't really connect with the Dark Angel stuff. Having an army rule that is solely focused on objective markers, it means you've got to play for the objectives, which is how you win games, it's how you score points, I understand all that, but sometimes that's not really how I want to play. But you have to play this way with Votann. I guess it fits the sort of dwarven archetype mentality. Not sure how I feel about it though. But yield points, how are you going to be earning these things? At the end of each player's command phase, you gain 1 yield point if you control 1 or more objective markers within your deployment zone, and from the second battle round onwards you gain 1 additional YP for each of the following conditions you satisfy. So by the end of the first turn you will have 2 YP as long as you control your home objective marker, and then from turn 2 you've got to hit these markers and you get extras. So you will gain another 1 if you control 1 or more objective markers that are not in your deployment, or you control 2 or more objective markers not in your deployment, or you control more objective markers than your opponent. So I take it that you would get 1 point for 1 marker, then an extra point if you control 2 or more, and then an extra point on top of that if you control more objective markers than your opponent. But if you control your home objective and 2 other objectives in no man's land or wherever, you're probably going to be controlling more. But this is really focusing you onto taking objectives and sticking on objectives. In your turn, YP gained in this way is always gained before checking which ability Leagues of Votann units from your army have. So you check to see how many YP you get, and then whichever army rule you qualify for, you automatically get in your command phase. Whenever a rule allows you to spend YP, reduce the number of YP you have by that amount. Your YP cannot go below 0, otherwise you cannot use that rule. So, if you want to keep below 7, it looks like there are ways that you can spend YP as well. So, yield points are earned by capturing objectives. You get more in each command phase if you control more. If you're off to a hot start, you can even swap over to Fortify Takeover as early as the second battle round. How would that work? So you would get 2 for the first turn, you'd be on 4 for the second command phase, at the end of the second command phase, and then if you hit those, yeah, I suppose it's possible. If you hit everything you could do it, yeah. They're used for more than just switching from attack to defense, and many stratagems and enhancements get a little extra oomph if you spend YP when activating them. Not only does this give you a reason to build up more past the critical threshold, it also lets you manipulate your stockpile in case you prefer the benefits of hostile acquisition for that turn. So you do actually get some player choice. This is good. The Need Guard Oathband is the most conventional of the new detachments, building up YP by killing enemy units as well. So you could be drowning in YP. And it has some of the most effective means of spending them. The Ancestral Crest enhancement is beautiful in its simplicity. effectively letting you spend YP instead of command points to activate a command reroll stratagem once per turn. Have they just basically doubled up command points with this? Detachment rule, the Need Guard Oathband, martial leverage. Each time an enemy unit is destroyed you gain 1 YP, which is probably going to be a lot with Votann. They're pretty killy units when you get them going. And then that enhancement, Ancestral Crest, Leagues of Votann model only. Once per turn, when you target the bearer's unit with the command reroll stratagem, the bearer can use this enhancement. If it does, spend 1 YP and reduce the CP cost of that use of that stratagem by 1 CP. So it isn't a free. You do get free command reroll because that's only 1 CP, but you can spend YP to reduce the cost. So, as an example, if you are against Space Wolves, Logan Grimnar's on the table, and you are vected, meaning your 1 CP stratagems cost extra, you can just use a YP to bring that cost down. You're still spending 1 CP and 1 YP, but it's better than spending 2 CP, right? Interesting way around, because there's quite a few. Again, that vected rule is something that is popping up in 40k quite a lot. Interesting way around it. It's a little bit concerning that Votann are getting all the cool new toys to get around all the rules, but you are still having to spend a currency that they're generating. We'll have to see how this plays out. This will need some community testing, I think. But I'm interested to know what you guys think of this as an army rule in general while we're running through this. Let me know in the comments. When it's time to hit back, you have plenty of ways to use your YP. Honor of the Hold turns even the humble Hearthkian warrior into an armor-busting knife fighter, while Ancestral Sentence synergizes wonderfully with the blistering fire rate of the Ironkin Steeljack's heavy Volkite disintegrators with sustained hits 2. I think these Steeljacks are going to be a bit overpowered at first, aren't they? They're going to be very strong. We'll have a look at that hopefully in the next article. So, Honor of the Hold is a 1 CP battle tactic stratagem. When fight phase, target 1 Leagues of Votann unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Effect: each time you use this stratagem, you can spend 3 YP. Select 1 enemy unit within engagement range of your unit. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes a melee attack that targets that enemy unit, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. If you spent YP during this use of this stratagem, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 2 instead. So as a base, that stratagem gives you +1 AP. If you spend the 3 YP, you can improve it to 2 AP. And you can spend, if you're in that detachment or with that ancestral enhancement, you spend a YP to use that without a CP. I suppose if you're gaining YP by killing units, you're probably going to have quite a bit of spare. I thought it would be like spend 1 YP to make it better. Spending 3 is, you've definitely got to choose to do that. Interesting. And then we have the Ancestral Sentence. So this is a 1 CP battle tactic stratagem. When you're shooting phase, target 1 Leagues of Votann unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot this phase. Effect: each time you use this stratagem you can spend 3 YP, again 3 YP. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit have the Sustained Hits 1 ability, and if you spent YP during this use of this stratagem until the end of the phase, those weapons have the Sustained Hits 2 ability instead. There's obviously going to be ways that you can really ramp up your YP collection and generation if stratagems want you to spend 3 YP to get that extra buff. But the extra buff shouldn't be cheap. It should be worth, like, you've really got to consider doing it, or you've got to save up your points to do it. It adds more into the tactical play of this. I mean, going from 1 AP to 2 AP is nice, Sustained Hits 1 to Sustained Hits 2 is nice, depending on how many YP you can generate all the time. I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be worth it, but that's the joy of this, isn't it? You've got to choose to do it. It would have been nice if it was 1 AP and then it gave you like an extra attack if you spent the 3 YP or something. But if you are going to be drowning in YP, that might be a bit strong because you'd be doing it all the time. We'll have to see. I mean, this is, as with all WarCom articles, this is quick look. They're giving you a few little details, but they're not actually telling you a huge amount. So we'll see. It's definitely an interesting way of setting this up. Elsewhere, the close combat focused Delve Assault Shift detachment grants Chthonian Berserk the Deep Strike ability and Battle Line keyword. That's 2 nice buffs. with enhancements and stratagems aimed squarely at putting them into the melee as fast as possible. By contrast, the Persecution Prospect Detachment favours Hernkin scouting units and their long-ranged firepower, keeping enemy units pinned down with focused volleys that cripple their movement and set them up for brutally efficient counterpunches. That one sounds interesting. The Brandfast Oath Band makes use of transport vehicles to form mobile command centres, handing out sustained hits 1 to infantry that hang around nearby, while several stratagems giving your army an extra turn of speed while hostile acquisition is active. Lastly, the Hearthfire Arsenal Detachment brings your Ironkin and Brokir units to the fore, with experimental weaponry and their signature advanced firepower to drive would-be rivals away from central objectives. So each detachment has a little bit of flavour for each of the type of units you may want to build into. I do like it when they do that, it gives you more ways of playing your army. We'll see how focused they are. We'll be back with more from the new Codex Leagues of Votann later this week, including a look at the new miniatures and their rules tomorrow. That's in about 30 seconds. The ancestors are watching, and you should be too. So what do we think on this one? I think the examples that they've shown, from what they've said in this bottom couple of paragraphs, the examples that they've shown are a little bit tame. I think we need to understand YP more before we get an idea of what the army rules are actually going to do. On the whole, I don't think it's a bad change, but it does feel a little bit, when you look at command points and then YP and how they're going to be interacting, it feels a little bit of a repetition. But if it gives you more interesting ways of playing your army, or more interesting ways of powering them up, and things that you can do with stratagems and things to make them hit a little bit harder when you need them to do it, it could be quite interesting. I would expect you're going to have characters, maybe the elite heroes, things like that, that will be generate 2 YP extra, or do something and generate YP. I expect them to be able to play with that. Instead of giving you command points, they will more freely give you YP depending on how you build your army, potentially. But we'll see. Again, this is just a very small glimpse of what's going to be in there, and it sounds like all of this new way of playing is going to be completely new to the Index. So I'm interested, but I think we need to see more of all of the rules and how they're going to link in together, and how the detachments will play into the army rule and the type of units that you want to use, which is the problem with these articles. How about we jump over to the next article and take a look at what the new units are going to bring. Leagues of Votann reinforcements bring epic firepower and the greatest, shortest Tyranid killer alive. We saw a whole oath band of new units for the Leagues of Votann during the recent big summer Warhammer preview. From the Tyranid hunting hero Burry, it's not Bernie, it's Burry Agnesson, to the Swift Capricious. And they're just about to hit pre-orders on Saturday, if you hadn't realised. It's high time we found out what they all bring to the table. So, we absolutely must kick things off with the legendary Thrice Devoured, the last survivor of the Emberg Arne block, Burry Agnesson. This apex predator of a kin harbours a never-ending grudge against the Tyranids for wiping out his people and condemning his patron Votann to the mindless of solitude. He travels from battlefield to battlefield, feverishly hunting down the largest leader beasts possible, and slaying them with his Darkstar Glaive. Darkstar Glaive, that's a cool name, sounds very Tau. So it doesn't look like we have a huge amount about him, but we do have his weapon. So Darkstar Glaive, we have Bane. Is that an ability, or is that what it's called, or is that a choice of attacks? Not really giving us much here, but Bane, we have the strike option, which gives you precision. It is 5 attacks, hits on 2s, 12 strength, -3 AP, 3 damage. Pretty tasty. Or we have this sweep option, which is 10 attacks, hits on 2s, strength 6, -2 AP, 1 damage. Fairly expected. You'll have a big hit, and then you'll have a wide sweep hit with less damage. Still sounds pretty strong. Strength 12 is very nice. Then we have an ability Unhinged Vengeance. In your opponent's shooting phase, each time an enemy unit has shot, if this model lost 1 or more wounds as a result of those attacks, this model can make a vengeance move. To do so, roll 1d6 and add 2 to the result. It moves a number of inches up to this result. but it must end that move as close as possible to the nearest enemy unit, excluding aircraft. When doing so, it can be moved within engagement range of that enemy unit. This model cannot make a vengeance move while it is battle shocked or within engagement range of one or more enemy units, and can only make one vengeance move per phase. Again, we kind of need to see more of this. We're just getting a little idea of what he does, but he's obviously a melee threat. He's obviously going to be hitting hard and constantly moving up the board while he's being shot. I would expect, being a Votann character, that he has a fairly decent toughness and a fairly good invulnerable save as well. So we'll see. I mean, again, we need to know more about him, but he's obviously going to be hunting those big threats and hopefully doing some big damage and giving you quite a lot of melee punch and threat. But being a melee character, he's got to get in there first, so his vengeance movements will help, but he's got to survive them. Although he can't join other units and is somewhat vulnerable to close range firepower, anyone coming for the Short King best not miss. He's liable to charge headfirst toward the closest enemy when shot at with his unhinged vengeance rule, and even if they do bring him down, he'll get right back up again completely unscathed. Oh, that's gross. He's got a rule that he can come back up, probably with full wounds. That's awful. So he has to lose a wound to gain that though, so if they don't wound him, he can't move. While Bury is going about his business hitting as hard as a Redemptor Dreadnought in close combat, the Arcanist Evaluators prefer to stay way outside of the melee and test deadly experimental weaponry from afar. They also don't join units, but rather gain lone operative while standing near fellow infantry, which I'm sure they'll appreciate. This way the Evaluator only has themselves to melt when overcharging their Transmatter Inverter goes horribly wrong. So the Transmatter Inverter. Half charge gives you rapid fire 1, 12 inch, 3 attacks, hits on 2, strength 8, minus 1 AP, 1 damage. Full charge is hazardous and rapid fire 2, 18 inch range, 3 attacks, hits on 2, strength 8, minus 2, 2 damage. There's a theme here, it's all 3 attacks and hits on 2, strength 8. Overcharge, hazardous, overcharge, and rapid fire 3. 24 inch range, 3 attacks, hits on 2s, strength 8, minus 3 AP, 3 damage. So that's your big shot, but it might kill you. Overcharge, each time this bearer takes a hazardous test for this weapon profile, subtract 2 from the result. If you overcharge, you better hope that you're going to be hitting them 2s. That's a fun little rule though. I mean, it's big damage if you get them all through. Well, it's 9 damage if you get them all through. But then rapid fire 3 as well, yeah, it's got potential to do some big damage, or explode yourself, all of which is fun, I guess. Taking a more calm and considered approach to warfare, the immense cognitive power of the Ironkin is put to good use with the Memnir Strategist, a superlative battlefield tactician whose analytical abilities are so strong that their predictions border on the supernatural, because they're a robot. And they're an excellent tool for manipulating your army's yield points. I think we all knew this was coming. So you can get the bonuses you need most each turn, and it can lead units of Ironkin Steeljacks. I wonder how that works. So, Computational Mastermind is the ability. At the end of your command phase, before you determine if units from your army have hostile acquisition or fortified takeover, for each objective marker you control that has one or more models with this ability within range of it, you can spend 1 YP or gain 1 YP. Not quite what I was thinking, but it gives you a little bit of play into which army rule you want. Yeah, I'm here for it. I think that's a nice little extra. Obviously you need to be pretty close to the target, to that 7, so you either need to be on 6 or 7 to get the real benefit of this for whichever you want to do. But again, it's YP manipulation. This is what I said characters would do with this new army rule. Speaking of the Steeljacks, these are my favourite units for the new wave. In fact, I think they're my favourite Votann units. I just think they're cool. They come with 2 separate datasheets, one for ranged combat with heavy Vulcanite disintegrators, and the other equipped with melee weapons and Auroch pattern bolters, which they use as pistols. They're reinforced combat frames, ideally suited to both roles, weathering storms of firepower while anchoring battle lines and smashing up hordes with plasma swords and concussion gauntlets. They have the purge responsibility each time you target this unit with the fire overwatch stratagem. Oh god. Hits are scored on unmodified hit rolls over 5+ while resolving that stratagem. If units from your army have Fortified Takeover, hits are scored on unmodified hit rolls of 4 up while resolving that stratagem instead. So at the start of the game, they can just overwatch on a 5 up when you're in your Fortified Takeover army roll, and I suppose you'd quickly play into that if you're taking a lot of Steeljacks. They have a 50% chance of making overwatch shots on a 4 up. That sounds a little strong. Depending on how good the guns are, something that's called a disintegrator, I'm going to work on the theory that it's good. The ranged Ironkin Steeljacks synergize with the Memnir Strategist, whose Predictive Guidance ability lets them fire their improved Overwatch for free once per battle round. Ouch. While helping the army reach the yield point threshold for the Fortify Takeover ability, which makes them better. Armies can also get further long-range support from an unexpected quarter underground, courtesy of the Chthonian Earthshakers. These unusual artillery teams use modified mining equipment akin to ancient Imperial mole mortars to launch subterranean shells, dig toward enemy positions before exploding, shaking bastions to their foundations and shedding surface infantry with great bursts of shrapnel. Again, we've got 2 types of, it looks like mortar shell. Breacher Ordnance is blast heavy and indirect fire. In fact, they're all blast heavy and indirect fire. Breacher Ordnance, 24-inch range, D6 plus 1 attacks, hits on a 5 up, strength 10, minus 1 AP, 2 damage. That's your harder hitting one. And then the Tremor Shells, again same blast heavy indirect fire, 36-inch range, D6 plus 4 attacks, so a little bit more on the attack front, hits on 5s, strength 6, minus 1 AP, 1 damage, so slightly weaker, definitely less strength. But all of these hit on 5s, it's heavy, so it's hitting on 4s. If you don't move them, you're probably not going to move them. Yeah, interesting. I thought they'd be more oppressive, knowing how they like to write Votann rules, but we'll see. Finally, the Nimble Capricious is a hovering scout vehicle that fills a niche halfway between Hernkin Pioneers and the Sagittar ATVs. I love the Sagittar ATVs. This adaptable chassis is split into 2 different units to support Hernkin operations in varying ways, with pairs of Capricious carrier transports splitting a Hernkin Jaeger team between them, while Capricious defenders lay down heavy firepower on the move. On the move, interesting. So transport-wise, this model can transport a unit of 5 Hernkin Jaeger models. They come in units of 10, so you might be worth taking 2 of these. I have no idea where they actually are. Do they just hang off the back or something? Stand on each of the hover platforms? I don't like these transports, these open top transports that don't actually fit the models it says that they'll fit in. It hurts my brain a little bit, much like the Tau crisis suits. Where do the Tau fit? The Tau don't fit in a crisis suit. Anyway, transport. You transport 5 Hernkin Jaeger models. At the start of the declare battle formation step, you can select 1 Hernkin Jaeger unit from your army that has not been split. If you do, that unit is split into 2 units, each counting as equal a number of models as possible. When splitting a unit in this way, make a note of which models form each of the 2 new units. Obviously, special weapons and things will come into play there. One of these units must start the battle embarked within this transport, and the other can start the battle embarked within another transport or can be deployed as a separate unit. I think that's just a fairly obvious transport rule, isn't it? There's nothing fancy there. It's obviously focused on the scout side of Votann, so if you're not running the scout stuff, if you're not building your army around the scout detachment, you can probably skip these vehicles. The article closes with "We'll be back to take a look at the lore in the new codex soon, so stick around and find out when the book and all of its new enforcements will be hitting the shelves near you." You don't need to stick around to find that out, because it's going up for pre-order on Saturday. And you know what, I'll do one better. It's releasing on Saturday the 23rd of August. So, WarCom, yet again, not telling you what's actually going on despite them knowing themselves. So these new units sound pretty good. Overall, the Votann stuff is quite strong, they're quite a sturdy army, and their vehicles are very tough. We don't actually know what the new Capricious does, it's just a scout vehicle. I'm actually surprised that this mortar, the Earthshakers, isn't overpowered. Is that fair to say? Obviously indirect fire is pretty strong, but I still don't think it's that overpowered. I think that you will run a couple of them because it's just a nice bit of extra firepower. Blast is always nice as well, but I don't think that they're as strong as they could have been, knowing how GW favours the Votann. The Steeljacks, and when pairing them with a strategist, they just sound like they're going to be a brutal unit. They sound like they are the Votann Terminators. I would have loved to know what their weapons do, and I'd love to know what their melee profile is. Plasma swords and the bolters, I think we've already seen that kind of stuff before, so we've probably got a good idea of what they're going to be. I would expect them to be three wounds, do we think? 3 wounds? And we know they have an invul save, we know they have a 2 abnormal save. They're going to be tough to shift. And if you have them with a shooting profile, I'd love to know what those disintegrators do. But the fact that they're calling them heavy Vulcanite disintegrators tells me that they're going to be gross. But they're stunning models. I like these guys. Whatever he's called, the Evaluators, the Arcanist Evaluators, it just sounds like a fun little unit. Not a named character, you can take 3 of these if you want. I don't know why you'd want to, but then they will hit quite hard if you can get them to pop off. Yet again, I think that they are maybe a little bit too powerful. That's a Votann trend. Depends how much they're costed though. Points is a big thing in this. And Bury Egnisson, I think we all knew he was going to be a bit of a beatstick, didn't we? Sounds good, but again, we don't actually know what he does. He probably has more abilities than what we've seen. Because he can shoot up the board when he takes a wound, he can move d6 plus 2. I'm going to work on the theory that he doesn't have any shooting, or if he does, it is just something simple like a bolt pistol. But it's an interesting unit. He probably has lone op, he probably has scout or something like that. I imagine you're going to be sending him off on his own hunting things. Yeah, on the whole, this isn't as much as I was hoping for, but then that is a trend with these articles. I like what I'm hearing. I think that there's going to be some surprises in just how strong this is when it comes out the gate. Tournament-wise, match play-wise, I think Votann are going to be in a very strong position until they're toned down, which inevitably will have to happen. But who knows, maybe the army rule isn't quite as good as I'm thinking it might be, and you can't farm the YP, the yield points, quite as much as it seems like you can. We'll have to see. I'm tempted to pick up the Codex and see, but I don't really want to be getting into codex reviews and things for every codex. We'll have to see. I'm not sure, but I quite like the Leagues of Votann stuff. I quite like the models. The new combat patrol is pretty nice. I can see myself having a little Votann force to play around with. I'd love to start doing boarding actions with Space Marines, with Votann, with some World Eaters. Tyranids I want in there as well, and Orcs. So I want to be picking up stuff like this so that we can start to do smaller scale battles and narrative stuff on the channel. We'll have to see. We are coming into the last 12 months of 10th edition, so if you are wanting to buy this and start running Votann, you have 12 months to make the codex worth it. We don't know if 11th edition is going to let you keep this stuff, and maybe this new army rule and things is all being written for 11th edition so that you're not going to be losing your codex at the end of 10th. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? They could do anything. They could make a great 11th edition, or it could be terrible. Anything is possible with GW at the minute. But I think that this all sounds strong, which doesn't surprise me with how the Votann released in 9th. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.